Revenge with Karen.
I knew exactly how invisible I was when I watched my own operations manual, word for word, chart for damn chart, get presented by my husband like he'd personally typed it with his Harvard-educated toes. As you can see, he said, clicking through slides I made during a stomach flu, our Q4 vendor flow shows 18% efficiency gains. I was in the back corner of the conference room, sipping burnt coffee from a mug labeled Team Linda, which I had ironically bought for myself after the last merger summit when someone referred to me as Brian's assistant. I'm not Brian's assistant. I'm Brian's wife, and the backbone of this entire collapsing Jenga tower of a family company. But you wouldn't know that unless you read the fine print on the contracts. Guess who wrote those? Me. 11 years. That's how long I spent fixing this circus. Came in when the company was just a glorified janitorial service, with legacy clients, and a pending OSHA violation, the size of Lake Erie. I stayed up rewriting compliance workflows, while Brian's mom knitted socks for our dog. I took the 2 a.m. calls from angry vendors who hadn't been paid. I saved the company's ass during the 17 incident with the temp who keyed a client's BMW and tried to bill it under damage control. But inside these walls, I was just Linda. You know, the one who helps out. If you've ever been the helper, then you already know the flavor of that humiliation. It tastes like sugar-free resentment dusted with expired gratitude. And I didn't just work for the business. I was the business. I wrote the policy binders. I built the contractor vetting system. I even created the emergency protocols they still use when the Wi-Fi goes out. But come promotion time, give a PowerPoint trophy to Trevor, the founder's nephew, because he once spoke at his college club about entrepreneurial synergies and wears boat shoes in winter. Real quick, before I forget, if you're listening to this story and your blood pressure's rising in solidarity, smash that like button and consider subscribing. It helps our team keep exposing these tales, and God knows, 95% of y'all forget to click. Help a Linda out, would ya? Now, let's get back to the betrayal. You ever get so good at something that people stop seeing it? That was me. I became part of the office furniture, efficient, quiet, necessary, and invisible. Every time a crisis popped up, I was called in like a damn ghost plumber. A contract clause about to kill a deal? Call Linda. Vendor compliance audit breathing down our neck? Get Linda. Cyber insurance premiums spiking after that ransomware scare? Linda, can you talk to IT? When things went right? Oh, that was all Brian and his father, Martin. They loved the spotlight. Martin would get up at board meetings and wax poetic about our family legacy of excellence. And Brian, he strutted around like he invented strategic planning. But the one time I corrected a mistake during a meeting, just a small, factual one, Brian gave me that look. You know the one. The tight smile that says, not in front of the important people. Message was clear: support us, don't outshine us. I started keeping a journal, not out of sentiment, but survival. Every deliverable, every clause I rewrote, every vendor I renegotiated, I logged it. Not because anyone would thank me, but because I knew one day they'd try to erase me. And that day came sooner than I thought. It started with a strange energy around the office. Closed doors. Quick glances. HR walking around like they were suddenly important. Trevor, God help us, Trevor in my seat at the weekly strategy meeting, legs crossed like he owned the place. I asked Brian what was going on, and he just chuckled. Nothing for you to worry about. You've done great work, babe. Really helped get us here. Helped. That word hit me like a slap with a velvet glove. You help your kids tie their shoes. You help someone move a couch. You don't help build an entire company from duct tape and broken legacy software. I knew then they were planning something, and I wasn't going to be part of it, so I did what I always do. I went quiet. I went steady. And I started rereading the contract I rewrote last spring. The one Martin and Brian had signed without looking because I told them it was just formatting fixes. They should have known better. I don't format. I prepare. The betrayal didn't explode like a firecracker. It slithered in like mildew, quiet, rotten, already too deep to scrub out by the time you smelled it. I was standing in line for limp buffet salmon at the company strategy offsite, listening to our new HR director make small talk about macrobiotic fasting or some shit when I heard it. A junior exec, voice dripping with mock excitement, turned to her coworker and said, "Can you believe Trevor's going to be VP of strategy? God help us." I didn't react, didn't blink. Just scooped myself a sad, flaky corner of fish and walked out onto the hotel balcony like I hadn't just been stabbed in the back with a shrimp fork. VP of strategy. The role I created when the company was still taking client meetings in a converted storage closet. The role I shaped with 10 years of logistical trauma, regulatory nightmares, and contract battles. The role that exists because of me. And they gave it to Trevor. Trevor once asked me if EBITDA was that AI thing from Elon Musk. I stared out at the hotel's man-made lagoon, water-dyed Caribbean blue, fake palm trees swaying in bought wind. It looked exactly like what this company had become. Synthetic, shiny, dumb as hell. I walked back inside, weaving through a sea of collared shirts and fake laughter until I found Brian in the lobby lounge, sipping a $22 cocktail like he wasn't actively detonating our marriage. Gave Trevor the title? I asked, no venom in my tone, just fact-checking, like asking if the fire alarm going off was real or just a drill. He looked up, gave me that smug little boy grin he saves for golf buddies and startup founders. We're giving the title to my cousin. It's political, babe, optics. You're already doing the work, you don't need the name tag, right? The laugh that almost came out of me would have peeled the wallpaper off the wall. I didn't let it, I nodded, not in agreement, but in recording. Like, okay, that's going in the file. Brian leaned back, clearly thinking the conversation was over. We'll figure out something for you, maybe a consultant role or ops liaison, something behind the scenes. You've never cared about titles anyway. That was the part that almost broke me. You've never cared about titles. No, Brian, I've just never demanded one. Because I thought this was our company. Because I thought building something together meant I didn't need to fight for recognition like a damn intern pitching TikToks. You're right, I said softly. I don't need the name tag. He smiled. That greasy, relieved smile of a man who thinks he just avoided an argument. See, that's why I love you. You get it. I left him in that chair, drink in hand, his brain already on hole 7 at tomorrow's golf mixer. I walked straight to Martin's room, the family lawyer, their legal bloodhound since the Reagan administration. He was reviewing some paperwork on a tablet, glasses sliding down his nose, half a chicken wing untouched on a room service plate. Hey, Linda, everything okay? He asked. I handed him the envelope. He raised an eyebrow. What's this? Just something for the records, I said. You'll know when to use it. He opened it slightly and froze. Not because of what he read, but because he saw my handwriting. Martin knows I only handwrite things when I want someone to remember it forever. You're sure? He asked. I didn't blink. Understood, I said, echoing Brian's corporate cop-out voice back at his own clan. You're the family lawyer, keep it safe. And then I left, not in a dramatic exit. No slammed doors. No tequila-fueled tantrum. Just a calm, quiet departure from the scene of the betrayal, like a surgeon exiting the operating room after severing the right artery. Back in my hotel suite, I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and reread the clause from the MSA cleanup I'd revised months ago. Page 47, paragraph 3. The one about executive succession approvals requiring the originating strategist's authorization, a role defined under my name, timestamped, notarized, and signed by both Brian and his father. They'd never read it. Of course they hadn't. I told them it was minor formatting updates, wanted a clean title handoff for Trevor. They were about to find out what a dirty clause looked like. It started like most betrayals, with trust and a deadline. 3 months before the off-site debacle, we were knee-deep in prep for the acquisition. The acquiring firm's due diligence team wanted every foundational document scrubbed, verified, and aligned to their compliance matrix, contracts, org charts, vendor logs, and of course, the Master Services Agreement. MSA was a relic from the early days, patched, bloated, outdated legal spaghetti. It needed what Martin called a light spring cleaning. Naturally, that meant dumping it in my lap. Brian waltzed into the kitchen one night, where I was elbow-deep in old org charts and my 3rd cup of gas station coffee. Hey, babe, he said, pecking my cheek like a sitcom husband. Martin says the MSA's gotta be audit-ready by end of week. You good with doing your magic? Sure. Magic? I told him I'd have it done in 2 days. In reality, I finished it in 1, but I waited until the 2nd night to send it out. Not because I needed the time, but because I needed the timing. See, what most people in that family never understood is that real power doesn't scream. It whispers in footnotes, sidebars, and cross-referenced clauses nobody reads unless their job depends on it. And lucky for me, I knew exactly which parts no one would bother reading. Buried in section 9.3, right after the indemnification rewrite and before the arbitration update, I slid in my little gift. All newly created or amended strategic officer positions must receive documented approval from the originator of role functions, as defined in Schedule B1. What was Schedule B1? Me. Document I had personally filed a year earlier that tied all strategic planning functions to the department I created and named myself the principal architect. Brian had signed it. So had Martin, and the best part, it had been submitted during a routine board update that neither of them attended. Their assistant had added digital signatures, probably while ordering lunch. Now, 3 months later, all I had to do was reference it. Once I finished the revised MSA, I walked into Martin's office. He was eating a sad tuna sandwich and watching an ethics CLE on 1.5x speed. I handed him the pages in a branded binder, clipped neatly, and highlighted where his signature was needed. It's mostly cleanup, I told him. Some language updates for arbitration triggers, a few formatting tweaks to match the acquiring firm's preferences. He flipped through the first 2 pages and skimmed to the back. Looks fine. Send it to Brian so he can co-sign. I already emailed it to him, I said, like the helpful team player they thought I was. He's just waiting on your okay. Martin signed. Brian signed that night from his phone while watching Top Gear reruns, and just like that, I had them both. On paper, in ink, legally binding, compliant, ironclad. It wasn't just about revenge. Not yet. This was insurance. Don't spend a decade watching people take credit for your work without growing a spine made of legalese and salt. I knew the moment was coming. I didn't know the shape or the flavor or which idiot cousin would deliver it, but I knew. So I built a safety hatch they couldn't see, buried it under their own arrogance, and waited. It felt like planting a tripwire in a forest no one believed existed. And the best part, the wire didn't just catch feet, it snapped necks. Week after that MSA was signed, I got an email from someone on the acquiring firm's side. Just a routine compliance Q&A, asking about internal role authorizations and change logs. I flagged page 47 of the MSA and replied, please ensure this version is used for all future title validations. Let me know if you have any questions. I didn't hear back, which was good. It meant they read it. It meant the landmine was now armed. From there, I went back to being Linda, quiet, helpful, invisible. I sat in meetings and watched Trevor drop buzzwords like confetti at a Times Square rave. I listened to Brian tell the board that we needed fresh blood and that legacy structures needed to evolve. And I smiled. Oh, I smiled so politely it hurt, because what they didn't realize was that the structure they were trying to bypass was mine. And the clause that would gut their little nepotism parade already had their fingerprints all over it. Trevor strutted into the office like he was late for a GQ shoot nobody asked for. Cream-colored blazer, no socks, and a smugness that could curdle milk. His cologne hit you 10 feet before he did, some overpriced musk trying to smell like ambition, but landing somewhere between Axe body spray and a tire fire. He dropped his leather duffel bag onto the reception counter and gave the intern a finger gun salute. Hey champ, I'll need the bigger corner office. I do better with city views. Oh, and can you get my monitor mounted? I can't strategize with neck strain, you feel? Trevor was the kind of guy who said circle back out loud at brunch, who printed his own business cards before he even had the title. And now, thanks to family handshakes and cowardly silence, he was VP of strategy, without a single battle scar to show for it. I watched from the stairwell as he high-fived the HR director and unpacked a framed quote that said, move fast, break things. I wanted to walk over and whisper, honey, you're about to break the wrong clause. But instead, I went back to my desk, quietly, carefully, exactly like I'd trained myself to do. 2 hours later, an email from HR slithered into my inbox like a venomous snake wearing pearls. Subject, role realignment, Linda. As part of our evolving organizational strategy, we're reallocating board-facing responsibilities to streamline external communications. You'll continue to oversee internal operations, but will no longer participate in strategic presentations or executive prep. Thank you for your continued support. HR, they might as well have written, kindly step aside so Trevor can bask in your legacy. I didn't reply, just forwarded it to my personal email, then printed a hard copy and highlighted the phrasing, reallocating board-facing responsibilities. That was going to age like milk under a grow light. That afternoon, I took a coffee break downtown. Except I didn't go to Starbucks. I went to the 35th floor of the Cambria Tower, where the acquiring firm's legal counsel had their Midwest office. Officially, the visit was part of the ongoing compliance queue and for the merger. Unofficially, it was recon. The lawyer they assigned me, Sarah, was sharp as glass and twice as clean. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a smirk like she already knew something was off. "I appreciate you making the time, Linda," she said. "We just want to make sure the executive structure we're buying matches what's been contractually presented. You know how these things go." "I do," I replied, handing her a small stack of documents. "Just wanted to clarify the signatory hierarchy, especially as it pertains to newly created officer titles. Page 47 has the clause you'll want." She flipped to it, read silently, then paused. "Oh," she said, "that was it. Oh, but it was the kind of oh you get from someone finding a landmine in a bouquet." She looked up at me, her smile now a degree colder. "And you're still the active originator of the strategy function?" "As of this morning," I said. "HR did just try to reassign me. I haven't signed anything yet." Her pen tapped the page. "Would you be willing to notify us if any attempt is made to revoke or modify this clause?" "I'd be happy to," I said. By the time I left the office, the weather had shifted. Storm clouds forming, sky darkening like it knew what I was about to do. I walked 2 blocks in silence, stopped at a red light, and laughed, just once, quietly. Kind of laugh you exhale when the wheels have been greased, the engine's warm, and the cliff you're driving toward is someone else's problem. Back at our office, Trevor was holding a meeting about rebranding the mission statement. I heard him pitch, "Let's swap legacy for velocity. People love fast companies." I wanted to tattoo the MSA clause on his forehead. Instead, I sat down, opened my calendar, and scheduled one last update call with the acquiring firm's chairman, just a 10-minute courtesy touchpoint. Subject line, review packet final compliance copy attached, the exact MSA version signed by Brian and Martin. No edits, no notes. Page 47 bookmarked. I didn't need to be in the spotlight. I was the spotlight. They just hadn't looked up yet. The day before the merger meeting felt like the quiet hum before a tornado siren. Everyone moved with fake urgency, like actors in a community theater production of Corporate Synergy, the musical. Brian was in full strut mode, rehearsing lines he thought made him sound like a visionary. "This merger isn't just about scale, it's about legacy meeting innovation." "Legacy," he said, as if the innovation wasn't sitting 2 floors down in a windowless office with her name scrubbed off the org chart. "Linda," nowhere near the rehearsals. HR had made it clear in a chirpy Slack message. "Hi, Linda. Since Trevor will be leading tomorrow's strategy segment, your presence won't be needed in the merger session. We so appreciate all you've done getting us here." Like they were dismissing a caterer after the wedding cake was cut. So I smiled, closed the laptop, and got to work on the real deliverables. The finalized merger packet sat on my desk like a loaded revolver in a gift box. I triple-checked the MSA inside, page 47, bolded, bookmarked, printed in the same font and margin width as the rest of the document, camouflaged in plain sight. I ran my finger over the signature lines one last time. Brian, Martin, mine. They'd signed it like it was a rental agreement for a vacation cabin. I printed 3 bound copies, one for the company's legal archive, one for the board packet, and one for the acquiring firm's counsel. 10:03 a.m. I walked the documents to the legal desk myself. Tina, the junior paralegal, blinked in surprise. "Oh, Linda, aren't they sending you home early today?" "Apparently I'm not needed tomorrow," I said, handing over the folders. "But I figured they'd want these filed before the signing." She glanced at the packets and nodded. "Thanks. You want me to flag anything?" "Nope," I said. "Everything's already marked." Then I walked back to my desk, sat down, and sent 2 emails. The first was to Sarah, the acquiring firm's counsel. Subject, Merger Packet MSA Revision. "Hi Sarah, as discussed, here is the final version of the MSA that was signed and submitted for compliance. Please ensure this version is reviewed prior to formal ratification. See especially page 47 for clause verification. Best, Linda II," went to someone higher. Chairman Greg Whitley. Subject. "For your review MSA authorship note, Mr. Whitley, I wanted to flag a section in the final merger packet, page 47 of the MSA, that pertains to executive authorizations. I trust counsel will provide the necessary context. Regards, Linda Garrow, Head of Internal Compliance." Through EOD Thursday, I stared at the screen for a few seconds before clicking send. There's a moment right after you push the button where you wonder, "I do the right thing?" And then you remember the smug smile on Trevor's face as he kicked your feet off the roll you built. Yeah, I did the right thing. By 1 p.m., Brian was giving a walking tour of the office to a few pre-merger visitors, bragging about how far we've come and what an incredible team effort it had been. I stood at the far end of the hallway, sipping a decaf and smiling to myself. He didn't even look my way. Perfect. That night, as the building emptied out, I stayed behind just long enough to see Trevor's new nameplate being slid into place on the VP of Strategy's office door. I looked at it like a headstone. Back at home, Brian cracked open a bottle of wine and rambled about how proud his dad was going to be. "This merger's gonna change everything," he said, toasting nothing. I nodded, clinked his glass, and excused myself to wrap up a few things from my laptop. I wasn't wrapping anything. I was watching the fuse burn. The beauty of it was, I didn't need to show up tomorrow. I didn't need to raise my voice, make a scene, or slap Trevor across the conference table with a PowerPoint clicker. I just had to let the lawyers read what the men had signed. They wanted me out of the spotlight? Fine. I'd light it from backstage. 9:04 a.m., Thursday morning. The boardroom was packed tighter than a family reunion potluck, only with worse food and more backstabbing. Long walnut table, polished within an inch of its life. Folders stacked like dominoes. Coffee cups already half empty. The air buzzing with cheap cologne, expensive nerves, and the faint scent of Trevor's minty aftershave, which smelled like ego and failure in equal parts. Martin sat at the head, looking like a man rehearsing his legacy speech in his head. Brian was 2 seats down, nodding like one of those dashboard bobbleheads every time someone said the word synergy. Trevor was seated proudly next to the acquiring firm's visiting execs, grinning like he just won the damn lottery. Except the ticket he was holding was fake. Sarah, the acquiring firm's counsel, began flipping through the merger packet. Calm, unhurried, clinical, even. She let silence breathe like it owed her rent. Everyone assumed this was just a formality, rubber stamp before the champagne. Then she reached page 47 and stopped. Her eyes scanned the text. Once. Twice. Then she tilted the page slightly like she wanted to make sure the lighting wasn't playing tricks on her. When she looked up, her face had that polite corporate mask people wear when they're about to unleash hell. Chairman Whitley asked us to verify a clause in your MSA, specifically regarding executive appointment structure, she said. Martin nodded dismissively. Yes, boilerplate stuff. It was cleaned up per our compliance lead's revisions, all signed and filed. Brian chimed in, voice smug. The updates were mostly formatting. Linda handled it. Did she? Sarah said flatly. Then she read aloud. Per section 9.3, all newly created or amended strategic officer roles require documented approval from the originator of role functions as outlined in Schedule B1. Beat passed? Sarah looked up. Can someone clarify, has the approval from this originator been received? The room blinked at her like she just asked who here was fluent in Martian. Trevor leaned forward. Oh, what does that mean exactly? I mean, I've been operating in the role for a few weeks now. Everything's been cleared through HR. Sarah turned to him, all smile, no warmth. It means your appointment is not recognized under the terms of the executed agreement. Therefore, from a legal standpoint, you're not VP of anything. The silence hit like a dropped piano. Brian shuffled his papers like that might change what they said. Martin opened his mouth, closed it again. Then finally, this isn't the version we approved. Sarah rotated the packet so it faced him. Martin Garrow, correct? Yes. She tapped the signature block. You signed this. Right here. Dated 3 months ago. Co-signed by Brian Garrow. Prepared by Linda Garrow. She looked around the room. I assume she's not here today. Trevor went red. What the hell is this? She tricked you. This clause wasn't in the draft we saw. Sarah's eyebrow arched. Well, if you'd read the final version before signing it, Mr. Garrow, you might have noticed. Then she turned back to Martin and asked, calm, casual, lethal, you signed this. Martin squinted at the page like it had betrayed him personally. She said it was formatting. Just formatting. Sarah actually laughed. Not a chuckle. A short, sharp, real laugh. It echoed in the glass and marble tomb of a room like a shotgun. Well, she said, flipping the packet closed, this formatting just invalidated your strategic appointment, which means your internal reporting structure is non-compliant, which means this merger isn't moving forward until it's resolved. Someone dropped their pen. It sounded like thunder. Brian tried to lean into his charm, voice too bright, grin too wide. Look, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. We can get Linda on the phone. Sarah cut him off. I'd advise against that. She placed the packet down like a judge slamming a gavel. Chairman Whitley has already been briefed. Our firm's position is that executive misrepresentation constitutes material risk. We're initiating a compliance hold until further review. Trevor stood up, knocking his chair sideways. This is bulls, Martin snapped. Sit down, Trevor. The acquiring firm's delegation began quietly collecting their folders. No yelling, no fireworks, just the slow, inevitable collapse of a dynasty built on arrogance and assumption. Linda didn't need to be there, because her signature was. Trevor shoved the boardroom door open so hard it smacked the wall and bounced back like it was rejecting him too. He stormed down the hallway, barking into his phone, probably calling some trust fund buddy or his Pilates instructor/life coach/astrology therapist. It's sabotage. She ambushed us. I'm not sitting here while they let some compliance lady derail everything. Do you know who I am? Yes, Trevor, we do now. Inside the boardroom, the silence had curdled into chaos. Martin looked like someone had poured boiling water into his loafers. Brian was furiously tapping into his iPad, trying to pull up earlier versions of the MSA, as if maybe the magical version without my clause would appear and erase the one they signed in ink. The acquiring firm's team was packing their folders, expressionless, corporate theater masks of disappointed neutrality. We'll get this resolved immediately, Martin said to Sarah, forcing a weak smile that looked more like a dental emergency. We'll speak to Linda today, straighten it all out. Sarah didn't even look up from her briefcase. As of this moment, the deal is on hold. Brian snapped. That seems a bit extreme, don't you think? She paused, looked him straight in the eye. What I think is that your internal leadership chain just imploded under a clause you signed and didn't understand. I think that's extreme. The door closed behind her like the end of a eulogy. The next 48 hours were a slow-motion train wreck, viewed through a kaleidoscope of legal panic. Lawyers crawled over every document like ants on a dropped candy bar. Calls were made, voicemails left. HR launched an internal review, which was corporate code for we need to look busy before someone fires us too. And through it all, my name kept surfacing. They couldn't bury me now, not when the compliance logs showed L. Garrow on nearly every foundational framework they were trying to sell, not when the contract change tracker listed me as the last editor on the revised MSA, not when the Schedule B1 filing linked originator of strategic operations functions directly to my employee ID. I wasn't just part of the company anymore. I was material to the transaction. That's a legal phrase, by the way, a delicious one. It means they can't move forward without you. Like trying to sell a car when the engine belongs to someone else. I didn't lease them that engine. I built it. The family tried to spin. Oh, how they spun. Brian emailed Sarah a revised title appointment form with Trevor's name scratched out and replaced with acting VP pending authorization. He even CC'd Martin and tried to act like it was all a planned realignment. Sarah replied with a single sentence. Any appointment without approval from the role's originator will violate Section 9.3. Martin called me directly. First time in months. Linda, sweetheart, there's been a misunderstanding. We'd like to sit down, talk this out. Maybe clarify what was intended in the MSA. We can come to an agreement. I let him leave the voicemail, then forwarded it to Sarah, and said nothing. That was the part they didn't understand. Silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Words can be twisted, misquoted, debated. Paper cannot. The acquiring firm called me the next morning. Not the lawyer this time, the chairman. Miss Garrow, I wanted to personally thank you for flagging that clause. We reviewed your logs. Impressive work. Appreciate it, I said, casually sipping coffee in my kitchen like I wasn't watching a corporate empire collapse from the inside. We'd like to discuss a potential advisory position, separate from the Garrow family. Just to ensure continuity. Happy to talk. Ryan texted me around noon. Please call me. This is spiraling. I stared at the screen. The man who once said, you've never cared about titles anyway. Now begging for the woman behind the title he tried to erase. I turned the phone over. Back in the boardroom, Trevor's nameplate had already been peeled off the door. The glue left a faint outline, like a ghost that still hadn't realized it was dead. And the best part, I never raised my voice. Buried me behind the scenes. I just used the back door to lock them all inside. The email came in at 7:46 a.m., and it was as desperate as it was formal. Subject: Invitation to discuss MSA clause revisions from Martin Garrow to Linda Garrow. Linda, the board would appreciate your insight regarding the recent clause conflicts identified by the acquiring firm. We hope to clarify authorship, intent, and revision timelines. Please join us in conference room at 10 o'clock a.m. Martin translation. Please come save us from the consequences of ignoring you for 11 years. I didn't reply. I just arrived 10 minutes early with a simple gray tote bag. Inside, printed logs of every MSA revision, tracked changes with metadata, signature timelines, and the Holy Grail, Schedule B1, complete with notarized timestamp, and a list of functions tied directly to my role as Strategic Operations Originator. I walked into the boardroom without knocking. The room fell quiet the second the door clicked shut. Martin was already seated, looking like a man trying to smile through gastrointestinal failure. Brian sat rigid, arms crossed, as if the physical act of folding himself would protect him from implosion. Two board members I barely knew gave polite nods. Trevor's seat, empty. Linda, Martin said, forcing a smile that pulled too hard at the edges. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I had a cancellation, I said, setting my tote bag on the table. Brian cleared his throat. We wanted to walk through the sequence of revisions, especially the authorization clause in 9.3. There's some confusion about how that language ended up in the final draft. Is there? I asked, pulling out the first binder and opening it to a full-page screenshot of the version control logs. Red ink, timestamps, user credentials, all mine. I slid the page toward Martin. That's the day I made the changes. March 4th, 11:13 a.m. You were in Scottsdale. Brian was in Chicago. I emailed the draft that evening. You both signed it by March 6th. Brian frowned, but we assumed those were formatting edits. You didn't ask, I said calmly, and you didn't read. One of the board members leaned in. So this clause requiring your sign-off on any new strategic officer roles, that was intentional? As intentional as Trevor's appointment was arrogant, I replied. Silence. No one dared to speak. I also brought this, I said, pulling out the Schedule B1. Filed last year. Defines the architecture of strategic operations. Lists me as the role's originator. Also signed by both of you. Martin adjusted his glasses, eyes scanning the document like he was hoping it would dissolve if he squinted hard enough. Brian opened his mouth, then closed it. For once in his life, the man had run out of things to spin. I stood, smoothing the crease from my blouse. Let me be clear, I'm not here to gloat. I'm not asking for an apology, and I don't want my role back. Martin blinked. You don't? No, I said. I'm stepping away after the merger. I've already communicated that to the acquiring firm. Brian leaned forward. But Linda, you're critical to the closing process. They won't move forward without your compliance certification. I'm aware, I interrupted. That's why I'll see the transition through on my terms. Martin's voice softened. We can offer you a formal title, backdate it, VP of Strategy, or EP. I smiled, just enough to show teeth. You don't get to offer me titles anymore. That shut him up. I'll remain in an advisory capacity, I continued, limited strictly to document compliance, transition planning, and escrow management. Once the ink is dry, I'm done. Where will you go? One board member asked, trying for casual. I already have an offer, I said, from someone who read the fine print. I gathered my papers, slid them neatly back into my tote, and walked to the door. Linda, Brian said, voice thin, why didn't you just talk to me first? I paused. Never heard me when I did. And then I walked out, not triumphant, not spiteful, just done. The elevator doors closed, and with them the chapter. I wasn't the angry wife. I wasn't the bitter worker. I wasn't the underestimated compliance girl. I was the architect, and now I was taking the blueprints with me. The final signing took place in the same boardroom that had once treated me like wallpaper. Same long table, same polished floors, same expensive water bottles with names I couldn't pronounce. Only this time, there was a different weight in the air. Heavier, calmer. The kind of silence that comes after a storm has flattened every tree in sight and left only the things bolted to bedrock. The Garrow family looked like they'd aged 20 years in 2 weeks. Martin wore the brittle smile of a man clinging to relevance by his fingertips. Brian's jaw was locked so tight I could hear his teeth clicking when he nodded at people. And Trevor, gone. Quietly scrubbed from the seating chart, his office emptied out over the weekend. Not even a goodbye bagel. At the head of the table now sat someone new. Claudia Mendez, the acquiring firm's newly appointed chair. A woman who didn't speak unless the words had a point, who didn't blink unless there was a reason. I'd met her once, quietly, during a compliance queue and a Zoom call no one bothered to log. She had asked one question, did you write the clause? And I'd simply replied, yes. Now here she was, reviewing the final merger documents with surgical precision. No fluff, no filler. Just the law, the ledger, and the last signatures needed to seal everything into stone. She flipped the final page of the packet, pressed it flat with her palm, and looked up. "Before we proceed," she said, voice steady, "I'd like to acknowledge someone who's made this transition possible. Someone who built the foundation your company didn't realize it was standing on." Every head turned. "Linda Garrow," Claudia said, "the actual architect of your internal compliance rebuild." I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just looked back at her and said, "Thank you." She slid a second envelope across the table, smaller, unbranded, sealed in gold foil tape. Inside, a consultancy contract with the Garrow family, not through the firm they once controlled. This was with her board: strategic advisor, compliance and escrow oversight. Private, direct, ongoing. The exact kind of role they'd never thought I deserved, but one built entirely on the mountain of proof they'd accidentally signed with their own names. Martin reached for his coffee like it could steady his hands. Brian looked like he wanted to crawl inside his suit lining and disappear. Not one of them spoke, because what could they say? Oops, turns out the woman we sidelined now owns the keys to our final valuation. Sorry we handed power to a man-child with a podcast instead of the expert who saved us from 3 audits and a federal fine. No, they said nothing, because I hadn't screamed. I hadn't thrown things. I hadn't lit the building on fire. I'd let them implode. Silently, completely. The meeting ended with 2 strokes of pen. First, Claudia signed the final merger contract. Then she slid my consultancy agreement toward me. "Welcome aboard," she said. I stood, took my copy, and turned to leave. No hug, no handshake, just presence. At the door, I paused and looked back once, not for effect, but because I wanted to remember it exactly as it was. Martin, shoulders sunken, staring at the edge of the table like it owed him an apology. Brian, tapping at his phone as if he could text his way back to control. And 2 empty chairs, one where Trevor used to sit, and one they thought they'd pushed me out of. I didn't take either. I had my own seat now, somewhere higher, somewhere quieter, where power lives in paragraphs, not praise. And legacy doesn't come from who speaks the loudest, but from who writes the contract. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.